Good afternoon, everyone. As always, we'll give 5-10 minutes for people to join, and then we'll start about 2:35. Hi, Sandeep. Am I audible?
Good afternoon.
Good
Hello.
afternoon. All right, we'll give people some time to join, and around 2:35 we'll start the session.
Yeah, sure.
Sandeep, in the meantime, you can probably start your screen sharing and keep the PPT's first slide ready.
Of course, yes. I'm sharing my screen, Subbu. So let me know. So once it is visible to you all.
Yeah, it is visible.
Voice call from the HVAC.
Right. I think we have a lot of people.
Yes, sir.
So let's start.
Hmm.
Uh, so before we go ahead, let me give a quick introduction of our speaker for today. So Sandeep, he is a senior developer and a tech lead at the DigiFact. Has over 7.5 8 years of experience in application development as well as developing and delivering high quality secure applications. And he is going to be giving us an overview today on what are the best practices, security practices that can be followed when we are exposing and consuming APIs in OutSystems. As an experienced OutSystems developer, I think we can learn a lot from his experience and inputs. And I encourage the audience, as always, to we will take periodic breaks to ask for questions. Please do vocally ask your questions, put it in the chat, raise your hand or ask questions. The idea is to ensure a very interactive session and so that you can understand and you can gain the most from this session. when you ask more questions is also when we get to think on some of those questions. Some of the it is possible some of your questions we may not have answers for, but we will definitely look into it and get back to you on that. So that's how, as a collective group, we will also learn. All right. So without further ado, let me introduce Sandeep. Sandeep, the stage is all yours. Please go ahead.
Yes, Subbu. Thank you. Thanks for your brief description. And hello, everyone. So, good afternoon, all. And thank you to have all of you here in our weekend in the afternoon. And as Subbu discussed already, and he briefed about me. So, myself, Sandeep, I am working as a senior technical lead in the DigiFax services. And I've been working as a software developer since last 8 years. But with OutSystems, I've been working since last 4 years. So this is how about my brief description, and so we'll start talking about this API integrations in OutSystems. So before we discuss how we can secure the APIs when we integrate the services from the other external services, or even for the matter when we are exposing APIs from our system to other services that consume and access our data. So before that, we'll have a brief understanding how to integrate APIs and how to expose APIs from our system to another system, so that it will give a bridge communication between two different systems. So our agenda is to see how we can consume REST APIs, how to expose a REST API, and how we can map the data types and simple and advanced customizations. We can simply call the handlers that are available in the OutSystem REST API integrations. So how to handle the errors and how can we secure the REST APIs, and at the end, so when something goes wrong, how to log and troubleshoot the errors in the API method. So that is what the agenda that we have for today's session. Yeah. So integrating REST API node systems. So you might all know that it is the easiest process to connect with external services over REST APIs from OutSystems to any other service which is providing services to. Uh, Subbu, is my screen visible to you, to all of you?
Yeah, it's visible. You
Uh,
might want to go into presentation mode so that the text is a little bit readable better.
okay.
Yeah, I think this is better. Yeah.
It works.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And my active slide is also visible to you. I am at
Yes.
slide number 3 now.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So this is how we can connect between systems. So APIs are lighter weight and we can integrate between the systems easy. So we can integrate. Sorry. So we can integrate APIs in APIs in two methods. So we will see how to consume a method in OutSystems. So either we can consume the API a single method, or if you have a Swagger support file, we can consume all methods at once. So these both are possible in OutSystems. So utilize OutSystems to consume specific REST API methods, and this is all we know. So based we can put the HTTP URL over there, API URL, and we can define the proper HTTP where based on the service end that is providing. And if you can test, and if you finish the API method inside our environment, it will create the data types and data structures which are called compound data types, so that it will map the request and response that you are transferring to the external systems. So once the API method is created, you can very well use it in your business logic or in your consumer modules, whatever you call. So this is a simple presentation how we can consume a REST API method. Or you can go into the logic tab and you can put the URL in the integrations area. In the rest, you can consume method. So you can select either one method or multiple methods as we discussed earlier. And all you need to put the API URL and the information that is requested as per the documentation that's shared by the other services. And once this is tested and it is working fine, you need to finish it, so that the request and response data types will be mapped, and that will be created as an input and output parameters inside your system. So once that is done, you can very well use it in your logical modules. So we hope my voice is audible and the slides
Yes.
are
Yes.
active.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, so as we discussed, we can consume one or more methods at once. So instead of having creating each method at once, it will take a lot time of a development effort. So if you have an open API specification file that is a Swagger supported, if you have that file from the service side, you can get that file YAML or Swagger file, whatever you call. So you can upload or you can put the URL and you can import all the methods. Basically at the end, if you want me to share and show it to you how to use this, I can show a simple demo on this part. So this is how you can put URL or upload the file, and you can select whatever methods that you are intended to integrate inside your service module. So once that is done, so all the selected methods will be imported into your module, and you can very well use them in the consumer module side. So this is very well, this is a detailed procedure, but we all know that how to use these REST methods inside our logical modules or in the front end modules, whatever you call. So once you create this REST API method, it is more or less like your a server action or server method, whatever you call. This action can be used inside your client or server calls, and you can map the response and you can display the response, or you can do business computations based on your business requirements. So that is how it is. Okay, so what will happen once you test and import a method inside your logical module? So Outsystems by default itself will create a request and response data types, which are called compound data structures. So we don't need, or a developer don't need to create these data types manually, and it can be automatically imported and created when you test and finish the method. So this is also the out of the box thing that it can do. So input and output parameter data types, this again we discussed. So in the same endpoint method in the structures area, if you can see, it will be bifurcated based on the different endpoints that you are integrating inside your module. So if you see, this is the context endpoint. So the structures which are belongs to this context endpoint are stored in this context area only, so that you can see what are the request objects and response object data types that were created, so that you can use or clone in your consumer module, so that it will be loosely coupled. Okay, so this again we discussed about. So this is how we can use inside your data calls in data action methods or in your client actions, and you can map the data to display in the front end screens. Okay, so this is something that we are intended to discuss more. Sorry, discuss more. So when you are exposing an API or consuming a API, so ideally when you are exposing API, you may be expecting some information that needs to be passed over URL. Like when you are when you are intended to extract only a particular piece of information, so it could be based on dates, ID, whatever it could be. So when we have those inputs, ideally the best practice, and we suggest to use those information in the headers, so that by default Outsystems will encrypt the header information so that it will not be exposed to the third parties. So that's how it is. But for some reason, if you are supposed to, and if you are asked to create an API in such a way that your URL should accept the parameters, then the best practice is to encrypt the information, so that in the consumer side or in the service side you can decrypt back, and you can do the logical computations, and you can pass the data. So that is how it is. So you can use any of the available encryption and decryption methods for it that matter. But if you are not very much secured application that you are developing, you can follow the encoding decoding concept also. So it is not that high level. You can simply use simple base 64 encoding and decoding kind of thing, so that the service will decode the parameters that what you are passing over URL, and it will send the information to you. So that's how it is. So why it is important, and why do we suggest to encrypt the information that what we are passing over a URL? Because this will be exposed in the URL, so that basically when there is a logging system, so if you see in service center, the URLs will be logged. So when you are logging this URL, if you are passing IDs or passwords over URL, that sensitive information will be logged, and that will be exposed to any of the users that are having access to the service center. So that's how it is. So if you encrypt and if you use the encryption mechanism, so that it will be not a human readable information, so that the data will be protected. So it will protect the sensitive data and mitigates the risk of data exposure and prevents the unauthorized access. So even if anyone have the access to the service center, so if the user is using own credentials to authenticate himself to access your system, so that his or her user ID password will not be what you call will be exposed. Okay, so we can use some of the out of the box features. So you should always use this HTTPS to encrypt the data using transist, and as well as we discussed parameter level encryption. See, when we are handling with high level FinCorp business needs, so ideally their ask is to encrypt the entire payload, or their ask is to encrypt at least the values that you are passing. So the attributes will be okay, but the values which you are passing against to the attributes should be encrypted, so that it will not be tampered in between. So in such scenarios, you should serialize the information, and you should encrypt, and you should pass it to the service level. So that is how it should work. And it, yeah, as we discussed, it will restrict the visibility. And okay, so here we can leverage the API gateways also. If you are using any Azure or AWS cloud gateways, you can use the out of the box features, so that it will enforce encryption and security policies. So that is how it is. So make sure when you are exposing APIs, and if you are using URL parameters to get the information or to pass the information, make sure you should use the proper algorithms to encrypt and pass the information. So that is how it is. Okay. So, and again, we'll discuss how to expose a REST APIs, and we all know that. So, in addition to consume and connect to the other systems, you can also expose your system, so that other systems can consume and connect to your system and get data, or post data to your systems. So here, basically, if you see, in exposing side, we can talk about how to expose a REST API, and how do you handle authentication, and how to customizing endpoint URLs and custom HTTP codes. So more or less this knows everybody, but okay. So to expose a REST API, all
So,
we
Sandeep, just
yes,
let's pause for a second. So, we just completed the first section, which is about how do we consume APIs.
correct,
So, let's take a 2 minute pause and um, see the exposure. Consuming and exposing APIs are fairly standard, and we expect that the audience here is a little bit more intermediate to
correct.
the advanced.
Hmm.
So, if you guys on what has been discussed so far, we can take a quick pause now and we can try and answer those questions. If there are any other questions that you want to put in the chat, please go ahead. We'll take a 1 minute pause if anybody has any questions, and then we'll continue forward.
Definitely. Yes. Subbu.
So, you guys can raise your hands and ask a query, or you can put the query in the chat, is also fine. Yes, Nikhil, go ahead.
So I am saying that this theoretical thing that Sandeep is explaining, uh, you are showing how to use it practically in our system later on.
Yeah, so we aren't doing any demos on how to integrate APIs,
Uh,
but if there are any specific queries that you have in terms of how to integrate APIs, that we can definitely look into.
yes, yes.
See,
No,
ideally,
I
yeah.
want to know how to use the encryption, tokenization, practically. That is
Okay, so we'll try and see what we can cover today.
okay.
What we are going to talk about broadly is what are the different methods of encryption and what we call tokenization that we can use. We'll go over some of those methods,
Okay.
and depending on the availability of time, either we can do a deep dive now, or we can do a specific session in the next session where we can do a deep dive into, let's say, OAuth or encryption or something of that sort.
Yes.
Well,
Today's
definitely.
is yeah,
Yes.
today's session will be more broadly based on all the different avenues and areas that you can use to
Hmm.
make your API integrations more secure.
Yeah.
Okay.
If there
Yeah.
are any specific requirements, we can definitely do a deep
No,
dive
no.
later on.
I just want a security thing. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Sorry.
so as you suggested, so we can plan a differentiation. So based on that,
Yeah,
we'll not cover theory part so that we can do a demo on how and
correct,
based on all the security mechanisms
correct,
that we have.
correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have one more question from Sriram.
Yeah, hi. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
yeah. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, is there any recommendations on which library out of your Forge or OutSystem supported will be the fastest in payload encryption?
So there are multiple Forge components. Crypto library is a Forge component that is actually supported by OutSystems itself.
Correct.
So that would be a good place to start. But there are also other libraries available. Uh, Crypto library is for server-side encryption. There may be requirements in your application where you want to do client-side, for which there are a few Forge components like subtle encryption as well as JS encrypt, both
Yes,
of which are there in Forge,
yeah. So
which are also a good place to start. We
correct.
can list out some of these in the communication that we send out.
Yes.
Great, great. Thanks.
See, if they are trying to use the client side encryption mechanism, so all if they are using their own algorithms, all they need to encapsulate in a JavaScript file, and they can use it as a very much functions. So that's
Correct.
also
So
possible. Yeah,
there are some ready-made libraries available. Again, it
yeah,
depends on what is the payload you want to encrypt. Do you want to encrypt files? Is it shorter payloads? Is it field level encryption? So accordingly, then we can look at different encryption algorithms. You can either use PGP for payload file larger payload encryption, and you can use JS encrypt on client side for doing AES encryption for your standard payloads, and then encrypt that AES key with RS-2048 key and pass both to the server side. So uh, I think encryption as a whole is a larger topic, and we will probably, if there is enough interest, in one of the future sessions, do a deep dive into encryption alone.
Right, right. That would be great, in fact, because from a banking sector
Yes,
perspective,
correct.
payload encryption is a major point for us. So,
correct, correct. Definitely. We'll definitely look into that. Yes. Okay. Any other question? All right, let's continue. If you have any questions, please put in the chat. The next pause, we'll try and answer those questions. Yes, Sandeep, go ahead.
Yes, Subbu. Thank you. So we'll firstly take a look at how do we can expose an API and what are the available handlers. So for the handlers part, we'll take a look for both exposing APIs and consuming APIs as well on both of these things. So to expose an API, so the intention is to access other systems to access your data from through your system. Either you can provide your data or you can allow them to pass information to store into your system. So this is how it will work. So you can create an endpoint in your logical tab, and you can create as many as methods so that it will act as in rest methods to them. They can integrate it, and also you need to secure your API methods. And by default OutSystems provides three types of security mechanisms so that you can secure your APIs when you are exposing. Those are actually none. By default it will be none. So if you are putting none, so your APIs what you are exposing will be public, and anyone who is having the URL and the type of the verb you are using, they can communicate with your system, so without any security. So that is one, and the other two types are basic and custom. So we'll talk much about basic and custom later. So this is how we can create the REST API method. So you can create different methods with different verbs. Okay. So this is what we are talking about REST API authentication. So if you put none, the no authentication is required from the consumer end. And if you put basic, so ideally the system will expect a registered user credentials So if you use basic authentication as your authentication for your REST API, the consumer end need to pass user ID and password. So the system will authenticate and it will allow the other systems to communicate with your system. And if you are selecting a custom authentication as your authentication type, then you need to pass key value pairs. You can generate and you can store these key value pairs inside your database. So ideally we would suggest to store these custom key value pairs in your database where you are integrating your exposing your APIs. So if you are exposing the same API to different vendors, so it is a best practice to create a table and you can store the vendor code and the key value pairs that you are sharing with them. And you can probably put the start and end date so that you can access and control on your start and end dates also when you are having a pricing mechanisms. So this custom authentication will works in such a way that, so when the other service is trying to access your system, so it will first fetch in the authentication handler. So the authentication handler will be triggered in the endpoint. So this authentication handler will fetch the headers and it will fetch the key value pairs and it will try to match inside your table that you have already created. So if that is matching, and it will allow the other system to access your methods, otherwise it will throw an exception. So that is how this REST API authentication works. And these are the a few REST API callbacks that we have. So this on before request and on after response were there in the APIs which you are integrating. So whenever if you want to customize the request just before you are sending it to the service side, you can use this on before request handler of your API method. And typically for one endpoint, you will have only one on before request and one on after response. And there are customized handlers also, on before request advanced and on after response advanced. So you can access the response in the as a text format and binary format, and the different headers that are being sent to the other service, and the just a minute. So that is what we can access in the on before request. You can customize the request. See if there are any static values that we are passing to the API method. So the on before request is the best place to append those values instead of passing it from the consumer end. So this is where we can use this on before request. So in the on after response, typically we will use on after response to read the data and to understand the what is the status of the response by reading the status codes. So if that response is not as expected based on your business line, you will handle then and there, and you will pass only the required information to the consumer side, so that you will ensure that you are passing only required information, so that this API will act as a lighter weight. And it will, in the on after response only, you can handle the errors also. So if there is any exception that is coming from the API method, you can handle it over here, and you can pass the response text as a text line to your exception message. When you raise an exception, you can pass the exception message to it, so that your wrapper action or whatever you call consumer modules action can handle that exception, and it can read the information. So if you leave the exception unhandled, you will be not able to read the response that what service is giving to you. So that's how it is. And when you are exposing your APIs, I think that is handled somewhere. So when you are exposing APIs, there is a on request and on response, and the advanced handlers were also there. So this is also something like you can append information or read information after the response is coming. So these HTTP status codes and the response messages are useful to debug and customize the requests when you are accessing the other services. Okay, so this on before request and on after response are simple customizations. So as we discussed, so you can see the original URL, or if you want to dynamically pass the URL, you can append the, or you can what do we call? You can concatenate the URL. And if you want to see if you are using any OAuth mechanism, so you can use the get token ka API inside this on before request, and you can pass the token to the subsequent APIs. So if you are not using over here, you need to call that API each and everywhere where you are using in the consumer modules. So to avoid that and to make it one place, if you can use it in on before request and it will be the centralized area, so that it ensures that whatever API that is being triggered inside from this endpoint, it will trigger the API token API, and it will pass the token which is coming from the token API to the subsequent API methods.
So, Sandeep, we'll just pause here for a second because there's a question related to this. So,
Hmm.
for OpenAuth 2.0, for that type of authentication, question is from Sai. In that, this is what you would ideally use. So, you would have in OpenAuth, you will have a URL which will generate the token with your client secret and your bearer token. You give the specific, you pass that, and you generate the token from the token service, and then in the on before request you would pass the API token into the actual API call which requires that token. Correct, Sandeep?
Correct, correct. You're right.
Yeah. So Sai, I hope that answers your question. And I see there's a lot of I think a lot of interest in doing this. So maybe Sandeep, and maybe the floor is open to other members on the group also. If any one of you would also want to be a speaker in one of the future episodes and share your demo of how you integrate a particular type of service or an API, then we can put together an episode where we can go through practical demos, which I think is something that the audience would also appreciate. Let's do that as well.
Yeah, yeah, correct.
Yeah, go ahead, Sandeep.
So yes, so the idea is to make it simple. So instead of using it in multiple places, so if you use it in on before request, so if there are any customizations or modifications required in future, you can do it in one place. So that's how it is. So this we discussed about, and if, we can have a little discussion over here. So to customize the request, you can use this on before request handler, and you can add any adders if you want over here, if that is not being passed from the consumer sides. And as we discussed earlier, so if you want to pass any OAuth 2.0 tokens to the subsequent APIs, you can trigger the API and you can pass that to either of your request body or to your any of your header parameters. So that's also possible. Again, so customizing the response, so this customized response is required when, so if you want to filter and process the response, whatever if, on a whole response is coming from a single API. So if your intention is not to read and process the entire information, so this on after response is the best place to filter and process the information. And if there are any errors or exceptions are being thrown from the service side, you will handle it and you will process the errors. So if there is any generic exception is coming from the service, you can handle it and you can pass the respective errors, respective exceptions that you can create inside your module, and you can throw the generic exception, or you can pass different exceptions over here, so that the consumer will be more interactive inform the consumers will have more interactive information based on the exceptions that you are raising over here. Or else in some cases, the service may throw an exception along with the needful information also. So if you are not handling the exceptions over here, you will be not able to read the information that which is being passed from the service side. So if you handle the excuse, if you handle the exception, you can raise a custom exception over here. So in the exception message, you can pass the actual response text, which you can access in the on before on after response, and that can be passed to your wrapper method, so that information can be readable, and the consumer actions or modules will not know any exception that is causing from the service side. They can simply read the information. Okay. And as we discussed, so this advanced customization needs to extend your code. You can write a simple C sharp extension, and you can write C sharp methods to identify. So I have included 2 to 3 areas where we need to write these advanced methods. And in the typical scenarios, if you are using a specific algorithm to encode or encrypt your request content, then you need to write this method. Or else, as we discussed in the session, you can use any supported force components that are available, so that you can use the out of the box encryption mechanisms to encrypt and decrypt your content. And you can add this client certification based on your advanced customizations only, and you can handle a complex response or customize it according to your needs. And there might be your use cases like in one endpoint you may have 10 to 15 methods, and you will as we discussed, you will have only one on before request and on after response for a given endpoint. So you might not know which API method is getting triggered and which API method is throwing the exception. In such case, I have seen in many cases that, so just to handle that, people or developers used to create different endpoints so that they can identify which method is getting this exception also. So instead, what we can do, you can simply use on before request advanced instead of the on before request handler, and you can create a C sharp method so that you can create a C sharp method to get the action name that what it is getting triggered or invoked. So based on that method, you can write a switch conditions or if condition kind of thing, and you can act accordingly. And you can process the response in the on after response advanced also. Yeah, so this is how it is. So you need to include these two namespaces since you are inside your C sharp method, and you can access your headers, access your response. This response is typically available in text and binary format, and you can get to know which method is getting invoked over here. So handling REST errors also we already discussed, and ideally we suggest to create a common action to handle these errors and pass generic exceptions to the consumer sides. And also, in addition to the service, whatever it is throwing your exception or error, I would recommend to add a rich error messages so that the consumer end can display that message to the users, or they can log this information so that it will be more readable and it is more understandable also.
Sandeep, we have a
Yes.
question, I think. Sriram, yes?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries.
My question was, you were explaining the what you call the C sharp method.
Hmm.
So, for a more efficient or a more elegant way of handling, uh, you
Correct.
know,
Advanced
to find
headers.
out what headers and all that.
Yes.
But
Yes.
then, aren't we getting into the high code space? Because typically, what I'm seeing is that, creating custom C sharp code then becomes a problem to maintain.
Yeah, so the idea is not essentially to go down the high code route necessarily, but the whole point of OutSystems as a low code platform is to allow for extensibility with high code
Correct.
where required. So
Right.
you could very well do the same thing in OutSystems in low code also, like
Like creating multiple endpoints. So, matlab, that was
correct,
the
correct.
example which was
So
given.
And
yeah,
again,
so
see,
by doing that,
maintainability comes into the picture. So if you
correct,
are creating,
maintainability will be a concern. Yeah, go ahead, Sandeep. Go
yeah,
ahead,
yeah.
go ahead.
So maintainability comes into picture. So Sriram, right? So Sriram, so if
Yeah.
you see we have 15 methods inside a single endpoint, and if you create 15 endpoints, so every time you deploy code to your target environments, and you need to configure all different 15 areas, right? So whatever base URLs that you need to change, and the custom authentications that you are using, you need to set up
Right.
everything. And when if you want to change the logging mechanism also to default to full or troubleshoot, then you need to do these changes in multiple areas.
Well, that's a very valid point. That's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, Subbu, if you
And
want to add anything.
yeah, and so the idea is not necessarily or to recommend that we always use .NET extensions. It is on very specific use cases. And
Correct.
again, the .NET library you create could be created generic enough that you have one across the entire range of applications that you have.
Correct.
So the idea is to make use of, like in OutSystems we have aggregates, but you also have the option to do advanced SQL queries if you want to optimize performance in certain areas. which the advanced SQL gives you that leverage. So the
Well,
idea is
that
essentially to use the best of
yes,
both.
yes. So yeah, yeah. So that is, I think, one special masterclass should be dedicated to that, because we are finding that aggregates are very sluggish,
Right, right. So I think
and we
that
we end up resorting to advanced SQL almost now, 60% of the time. So that can be a separate topic actually.
correct, correct, correct.
So
Yeah.
can I
So
put
again,
a conclusion
so
on this part, Subbu? So I would like to add one point over here. So I
yeah,
agree that so aggregates are system optimized, and there are chances like how we are discussing, like we are extending this C sharp when it is not possible in the OutSystems low code itself. See, I would give you a simple example. So when you want to do window operations, like if you want to use rank methods, dense rank methods, or row number, so it is not possible inside your OutSystem aggregates, and you should write a custom SQL. So that's how it is.
Sure, sure.
yeah, and so also here, I mean, given my past experience, especially with aggregates, also see there is always a fine balance. The more advanced SQL you do, the harder it becomes for maintainability, especially when you have junior resources handling it. The flip side is, yes, there is sometimes a performance penalty um, with the aggregates, but it also depends on how those aggregates have been formulated.
Correct.
Many a times what happens is that aggregates are the data model is not properly structured. I give you a very simple example of this. We ourselves were internally for one of our projects, when we looked at the data model, we decided over a period of time that we are going to split one table into two tables of 1:1 relationship, for the simple reason that for majority of the queries you need only about 5 or 10 parameters, which are smaller parameters, and the heavier larger text parameters are not required for the majority of the operation. So while it's an additional AO count, what it does is by splitting that into two tables, you optimize the amount of data that is fetched for a particular aggregate query, and minimize that overall performance penalty. So that keeps your code a lot more maintainable at the same time without losing leverage of the
Aggregate.
performance. So that will be a data modeling optimization and tweaking also. It's again, it's a fine balance between optimizing AOs versus performance versus maintainability. So it's that that's three. There's a very small space where all three intersect, but it's about identifying which space is more relevant for which application.
Yes, Subbu. So if I can allow, I would like to add 2 to 3 points
Sure,
over here.
sure.
Yeah, so see, ideally, so we cannot comment on how it is, because see, without looking the normalized patterns that how the database is designed, so whether they follow 1NF, 2NF, or 3NF, ideally, and also how these tables were structured and how they created indexes, and also see, I typically see while retrieving the queries, if the queries are taking more time or getting sluggish, people used to create more and more indexes, which is not efficient in most of the times. I'll not say for all the times, but most of the times. But even Subbu, so when you say when we are going for a decision to have 1:1 table also, so OutSystems best recommendation is to you create an output structure if you are not intended to pass the
Correct.
entire
Exactly.
information,
Yes, yes.
entire information from an
Yeah.
aggregate or table, whatever you call,
Yes.
so that the OutSystems itself will optimize the
Yes.
query
Yes.
in such a way that it will give you the information that which was
Correct.
mapped from your attributes to the structures. So
Yes.
this is also see that's what. So we cannot come to conclusion in one go. So we have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
see
It
all.
is very nuanced.
Correct.
And Sriram, again, like what Sandeep has said is absolutely right. So when you are pulling aggregates in the front end, there depending on which fields are utilized or shown on the front end, the system will optimize. But if you are doing a get data action, or if you are doing an aggregate where you are using data where it is not clearly specified, or it's not clearly listed out in the action, it will pull all of the attributes. It does not know what to optimize.
Yes.
So, like Sandeep said, one example is to take only the data required from that aggregate and parse it into a structure. When that information is available, then OutSystems automatically optimizes the query and only pulls the relevant information. So
Correct.
there are many performance tweaks that can be done.
Yeah.
Right, right. Absolutely. Thanks,
Yes.
guys.
Subbu, so yeah, correct. What you said is exactly right, and Sriram, you added also. So ideally, so people without knowing that they'll create the entity data types as an output parameters, even if they don't intended to take the entire information. So which will cause performance issues. So if they avoid that, and if they can create structures that are called compound variables, and if they can use that, it can be automatically. See, this is one of the aspect. I don't say that just because of this reason your queries or aggregates are sluggish, but there could be many reasons to
Correct,
that.
correct. And this is like the, larger problem which we would like to get addressed, because, most of the people who are working on this don't know these
Correct.
aspects of, what happens in production environments,
Correct.
especially for enterprise grade applications.
When
This
you
is
have
when, suddenly I have a production issue and then 48 hours we are, you have experienced it. So,
yes, Subbu, Subbu. So
Yes.
taking this Sriram's points into consideration, I think we should do a session on these best practices, pa.
Yeah, yeah, we should do that. We'll do
Yeah,
that.
how can we optimize and what are the best practices that you should follow, and
Yeah,
how to track the A Mentor Studio. So if you follow
absolutely.
the A Mentor Studio, I think it will take care for 80 to 90% of your problems can get resolved.
And again, so Sandeep, we also know personally pitfalls of following AI Mentor Studio to the letter.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So
So there is no one good
there is
practice.
no silver bullet.
Yes, yes.
Let's put it that way. There's no
Yeah,
silver bullet. It has
uh,
to be on a case basis.
yeah,
All right, let's move forward with the rest of this. But I think so. Towards the end of this, I encourage all of you guys to stay till the end. We have the quiz, and then after the quiz, we are also going to do a quick survey on what are the next topics that you would like us to feature as a part of these user group sessions. And if anybody wants to volunteer to come and speak and share their inputs as well, most welcome, highly encouraged. And yeah, we'll also plan to have some sort of a meetup maybe early next year in Jan for a physical meet and greet for all the developers as well. So, but let's go ahead with this session, and I think there's a lot of good points coming out from the group. So,
yeah, yeah.
let's proceed. Yeah.
So that's how we'll interact. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So as we discussed, so when we are handling the exception, so in addition to the exception that what service is throwing, so if you can add richness to it, a better status code and a better actual error message and a message that you can display to the user. So this will help the front end developers that who are using your service to display the information accordingly. So that is how it is. This also talks about the same. Yeah. So this is a simple snapshot and that we created inside our one of our application, enterprise application. So based on the response that whatever it is coming, so if you handle it in the customized response, and as you very well know how your business is intended to pass the information, you can pass the different exceptions over here so that your consumer sites are more efficient to read your information. So if it is 400, 401, 403, 404, because your service may throw a generic exception, but you need to handle it over here and you pass distinct exceptions over here so that your uh, more uh, consumers are more readable about the information that you are passing them, and you can very well customize the message that you are passing over here also. Your service may not be passing the actual information, and you can read and you can customize the response over here also. So this is where we can throw an exception and you can pass the message so that you can introspect and read the data. So this is the same. Okay, so if you can see, so we all know that the HTTP status codes ranges from 100 to 599. So uh, even if you are not following the all the HTTP methods, I would not recommend to use all at least, but you should use basic three types of HTTP's status codes when you are actually exposing your APIs. So do not send a generic status code, but if based on the request that is coming, pass the actual status code 200, 20 or 40 or 50. And also, when you are handling these HTTP status codes and when you are exposing an API, The most popular APIs use three distinct parameters patterns that abstract the error message, so that we saw in the previous slides, and you can add rich error messages to the message that what it is already having, and also you can pass error message along with the 200 status code. So this will make other vendors which they are using your service their job easier, because there will no need to handle the exceptions, because you are not throwing any exception. Whatever error that you have, you will pass the 200 as a status code and you will pass the information accordingly, so that they don't need to do much homework on it, and they can read the information and they can act accordingly. So that's how it is. And this is the beauty and anatomy of REST calls in OutSystems. I have take it from the our OutSystem documentation. So this is the life cycle of the handlers that is being handled inside an API. So it will do first security validations whether you are using none or SLS TDS. Then the on request will be triggered, and then on authentication will be triggered. So which authentication mechanism that you are using, either basic, none, or custom. Then if that is validated, then parameter deserialization manual. Okay, so this brings up again a new point. So when we are communicating through APIs, the data will be passed as a text or in binary format only. So whatever the JSON data that you pass or consume, so that will be serialized and then deserialized at the other end. So this is how. So when after passing the on authentication, the parameters will be deserialized and validated, and the method will be executed, and it will be serialized again, and the on response will be triggered. So this is the detailed description what happens in all handlers over here. This is again, so how to wrap your nodes into a common action so that you can, so Subbu already highlighted this. So instead of having it in multiple places, if you can have a common action that to check authentication check and authorization check, as many as APIs that you integrate, you can use the common action to handle this data. I think this is all same. Okay. So recap and descriptions. Configure. Okay, so this is what we discussed as a maintainability part. So configuring a consumer REST API once it is deployed to target environments. So typically you need to change the basic URLs once it is deployed to your target environments, because your base URL might be changed. So your service providers may not use the same base URL at the target environments, and it same applies to the basic authentication if you are using that also. So typically, many organizations will use the same basic authentication credentials. But if not, you have to change this ID and password over there and the base URL also. So once you change the base URL and apply it, it will be applied to the all the methods that are associated inside a single endpoint. So logging and troubleshooting again, so we all know very much about it. So you will have three different types of setting the log mechanism inside a REST consumed API. So if you set a default, it will be logging only the default information, and if you set full, it will log the full request response address information also. And if you set only troubleshoot, then the only when an exception occurs or error thrown, those information will all be detailed information only will be logged over there. And there is another important aspect when you are consuming or exposing an API. So when you set to any header parameter to log redaction to yes, that information will not be exposed as a plain text inside your logging areas. I think so. We had a discussion earlier, and but we'll discuss this over you. OAuth journey over you. So in the OAuth flow, the user initiates authentication by calling a token API to obtain the access token. This token serves as a key to authenticate subsequent API calls within its validity period. However, so this token has an expiry time, effectively acting as a session timeout. So which means this process re-authenticates the user, allowing them to seamlessly continue their journey and access protected resources. So which means this cycle ensures secure and consistent access while minimizing the risk of unauthorized use. So having the expiry time, so that if you are constantly keeping idle and if you are using the same token for the subsequent tokens, the service side might throw an exception so that you can recall the API and you can continue the process. So this is how OAuth works. Yeah. Okay, so and there is another interesting thing that we can discuss on API rate limiting on any of our journey that we integrated. So to maintain cost efficiency and system integrity, so we must enable API rate limiting within our journeys. So many, so as one of our fellow has said, the FinCorp domains leverage paid APIs that are expensive. So it's crucial to avoid unnecessary triggers. Additionally, we must protect against unusual hits or repeated requests within the identical information. So in OutSystems, this can be implemented in many ways. So one way that we did was you can use a site property to configure it. Before triggering the API, you can very well check the information that whatever it is coming in the request body. So if the same information is already there in your inside system, and if it is consecutively coming in the minimal time that you configured on the site property, you can stop that and without calling the service, so that you can save the resources over here. Sorry. And there are areas where you need to restrict your calls based on one IP only. So I typically when you are using services from, if they are what we call deployed in any of the cloud services like Amazon or Azure, so you can get the you can leverage the on request handler of your API, and you can get the request headers based on this. So you can use this HTTP request handler method. You can get the HTTP forward for tokens from here, header methods, and you can get the IP whatever wherever the request is coming to your system. So very well, if you know what systems that you can allow, I request you to not to hard code this IP addresses, and you can use either site properties, or if you can maintain database, you can query them and you can you can validate them before you call the method. So if that IP is not in your range, you can simply raise an exception. So this is how you can restrict only a few IPs. So even though, however, see, OutSystems by default use the IP restriction mechanism in lifetime, but still, if you are allowing only a specific IP address that you are allowing to your system, then this can add a more security on it. So this will provide enhanced security and the prevention of abuse and cost optimizations also. So if you are not intended to allow all the IP addresses, you can block the other addresses without calling your API.
Yeah, I think this is a good point, because I think most endpoints or public endpoints also, they will have their API providers will have their IP whitelisting, and it is always a good practice if you know that, especially if it is a system to system connectivity, you can always whitelist the APIs unless it is going to be a public API that you are going to expose. In
Correct.
most cases, for businesses, for enterprises, you will know your target URLs from where you are going to expect the API hits, and you can limit it and whitelist those and ensure that only those are entertained and others are not. Yeah, I think there's another question, Sriram.
Hey, yeah, hi.
Yeah.
My question was that in case of public networks, so you may get, say, suppose, so which IP actually gets captured? Because the device has one IP. Suppose it's a mobile phone. So that
Yeah. Yeah.
IP, actual IP, will never get disclosed to my server because I will always get, say, Vodafone ISP IP
Hmm.
or say Hathway
Correct.
IP.
So
So
I
yeah,
don't think
any
so.
thoughts on
Let
that?
No, no. So it will, but I don't think you will ever want to, because the sheer number of IPs you need to whitelist will be very high. You can
Yes.
always take an IP address and log it for API purpose, for audit log purposes. But I think this is more typical where you have two systems interacting. So let's say there's a middleware, you are
Yeah,
integrating with some third party API, like let's say um,
sure.
uh, could be Azure AD, could be your own Azure AD tenant, could be another legacy ERP system where the traffic is going over the internet and therefore the API is exposed to the internet,
Correct.
but it is supposed to be a point to point connection. So it is meant to be only between two systems. So let's say
Right,
there's a
right. So that,
legacy.
yeah, that is point taken. That is anyways handled by our perimeter firewall where there is whitelisting from for a B2B kind of scenario. But
Correct.
if there is an open connection to, multiple people,
No, but your perimeter
so
whitelisting will be only at your. Again, depends on your OutSystems implementation. If it is on-prem, then that is taken care by your on-prem. If
yes,
it's
yes,
on
it is
cloud, you
on-prem. So
can
that is
add
why
this
my
additionally.
questions, yeah, my questions are purely from an on-prem perspective. So we are
Correct. Correct.
completely on-prem. Yeah.
So in that case, that is mostly handled. So you may not need to add this additional layer of security since that is already handled by your hardware network. But again, if there is a certain range or certain series that you want to, you may want certain APIs to be accessible only through your intranet, which you don't. So, for example, you want it to be accessed only from your internal IP addresses. So you may then put a whitelisting there also. But if it is on-prem, I think most of the cases for on-prem will be handled by your on-prem network firewall devices.
Firewall device,
Correct,
correct.
correct. So just to drag that question a little further. So
Sure.
basically, all of that is handled. This is in case of especially for rate limiting. So from
Yes.
a rate limiting perspective, if I
Yes.
want to stop an attack or something, so multiple requests coming from the same IP. So
Yes.
I don't know which IP is that. So it's exposed to the internet. All my WAF, Akamai, everything is in place. But
Correct.
then I don't know whether those are genuine requests or not. So it's like, innocent
Yes.
bystander gets shot. So that's the kind of scenario what I'm talking
Correct. So I think as far as mobile devices are concerned, when it comes to mobile networks, every device has its individual IP assigned to it, a public IP assigned to it, which is dynamic. When it comes, so you can identify that. Now the only problem is, let's say there is one of your office spaces from where one particular terminal is misbehaving, and for some reason is sending multiple requests. At that time, the entire office space, that network's public IP is what will get flagged.
Hmm.
So, and I have seen this happen because maybe one or two users did not realize and kept calling it over and over again. It brings the entire site down for a few minutes, and that happens.
about. Yes, yes. I think that has happened here also. Correct. One branch did that, and the branch blacked out. So yeah.
Correct. So for API rate limiters, you bring a very important point. There are multiple ways. So one is the OutSystems itself will have some sort of has DDoS built in, where if you get multiple requests overwhelming from a particular IP address, it will block the IP address. What you can also do is to ensure that even your API does not. So in the on before request itself, or in the when you are exposing the API, if it is not, if you get from the same API or for the same
Request.
record per se. So let's take not just API. Let's say there is a particular application number or a particular record ID for which the API is being called, and you know as a process that it should not be called more than once in, let's say, 5 minutes. So if you maintain an internal API log, you can do a quick check and you can throw it out. You will not even process the API. So in the on before request itself, you can throw it out. That will further reduce the load on the system. Hello?
No,
I think he's
Sorry, I
having
think I lost audio in
bad.
between. Was I audible?
Yeah, yeah, you are audible, Subbu. I think he's having some network issues.
hello, sorry, was I audible? That is really great insight.
No, just last 30 seconds, maybe I think we lost your audio.
Yeah, yeah. I said that is really great insight. Thank you for that input. That's
Yeah.
really
So
good.
we had done something similar for a client where for a payment request, so when the receipt is generated, if we got for the same application number, the same payment request generated more than once within a 5 minute span, it is thrown out. It is not even handled by the system. In the on before request, it is thrown out, irrespective of the IP address.
Yeah, so that is where you need to handle it either on on before request or just
Correct.
before you
Yeah.
call the API. You will see whether this information is already processed by your system. You will
Correct.
just ignore it.
Correct.
Yeah. So
So
with
these
this,
typically also do, Sriram, when because our typical end users may also have the habit of double clicking. So again, that comes down to how your application front end is also implemented. Where are you able to block the double clicks or do a handling of double click there itself? That also
Yeah,
there are
yeah,
multiple
that's a
design
very
patterns.
crude way we are handling. We put loaders on everything because
Correct.
this has happened because bank users are very impatient.
Yes. Yes. And the flip side is the moment you put loaders, it appears as if the system is slow, even though it is not.
Correct. Absolutely,
you
absolutely.
need to handle it at front end only. Yeah. So that's the best practice. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
with this, we have completed our technical discussion and interaction. So if you can give us some break, give our attendees some break, and you can go with the quiz session.
Yeah. So let's maybe take a 2 minute pause and let's take if there are any more questions in the room.
Yeah, yeah.
Sandeep, can you stop sharing your screen? For some reason,
Yes,
I'm not able to share my screen.
yes, yes.
Now I can. Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you can see my screen. One second. This one. Okay. So while I'm bringing that up, if the floor is open, if anybody has questions, we can quickly connect. One second. Okay. Is my screen visible? Uh,
Yes, Subbu.
yeah. So you can scan the QR code and join the quiz, or you can just go to slido.com and enter the number here to participate in the quiz. I'll copy this number and put it in the chat as well.
Yes, Subbu. You're saying something.
No, I didn't say anything. I'm just waiting for the team members to join. I think we've got about 13 odd members who have joined now.
Yeah, yeah.
We have about a good 35 participants, so we'll give them a couple of minutes for all of them to join. Also, in the chat, I have posted the link for the episode 4, which was done. The recording for this session also will be uploaded maybe by EOD tomorrow, along with the first 3 episodes as well. So um, at the end of the session, after the slides, we will just put the contact information for our speaker for today, as well as the user groups, WhatsApp groups as well. So if you guys want to join, you can join that, or you can also follow me on LinkedIn. I will be uploading the links in post for the recording sessions for the first 3 episodes as well. Any other questions from the rest of the team? नितिन, सब कुछ समझ में आया?
Yeah, Subbu and team, thank you for your time
Yeah.
and effort. It was a really good session, and
Thank
I
you.
hope to attend more of these.
Yeah, thanks. We'll keep you posted on the group as well, and I will be putting it out like we typically put it on the WhatsApp group as well.
Okay,
So let me do that. So let me quickly, while if you are planning to drop off before you do,
right.
let me put the Sandeep, can you share your screen again? I'll stop sharing for a quick second. Can you share your screen and just go through the QR codes for the user groups as well as the LinkedIn profiles, and then we can come back to the quiz.
Yeah, Subbu, I'll share my screen shortly. Let me know once you are able to see my screen.
Yeah, we can. So can go to the next slide. We'll leave that on for a couple of seconds there. Let it be full screen only. It's easier to scan. Sandeep, you're on the first page. Maybe just right
Yeah,
click and go to the
I'm
last page.
scrolling. I'm scrolling. I'm scrolling.
Yeah.
So you should be able to see my screen.
Yeah. Maybe go one slide back. We'll put your information there. So if anybody wants to connect with Sandeep on LinkedIn, please feel free to scan his QR code. And with regards to, yeah, maybe go over to the next slide as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's the OSUG Mumbai WhatsApp group on the bottom right. If you scan that, you should be able to join the WhatsApp group where we periodically post key links and the next session updates. And you can always connect with me on LinkedIn as well, and I will be posting regularly what the next sessions are as well. Okay, great. I think we have 4 or 5 people who've joined. Maybe others are already there. Okay. All right. Thanks, Sriram, for joining. I mean,
Sure.
you can stay up back for the quiz as
Thanks.
well.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe we'll help
Sure,
us,
sure.
but I understand you. You've got other things. Right.
Thanks, Subbu. Thanks, Sandeep. Thanks, team.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for your time. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
All right. Let's go ahead and look at the. Let's go to the quiz now. So, window again. Okay. We got 25 people here. Yeah. Is anybody facing an issue in joining so far? Okay, I think we have everyone who can join in. There's still, it's saying 32 participants. I'm seeing only 25. Should we start the quiz, or is there anyone who still needs to join? If you are unable to, all right. I think everyone's ready. Let's go. Okay. All right. So let's start the quiz. First question. Surprising. Okay. I think this was called out by Sandeep during the session. But yeah, 100 to 599, those are your status code range for HTTP. Okay. All right. Second question. You got to be fast, you got to be right, and you got to be both together. All right. That's a lot better. I think this is an easy question. Yep. All right. Okay. I think this again was slightly confusing, but good. Next. All right. We see a change in the leaderboard. All right. Moving next. Fifty-fifty. This is a coin toss. And the winner is Paul. Okay. All right. I think we are falling behind. Come on, guys. We still have two questions to break through. All right. And now the last question for the day. This we got 100% right. Fantastic. All right. So we
So
have.
we're not able to answer that question. You skipped it.
Subbu,
Oh, did
last
I?
question did
I'm so
not
sorry.
answer.
Did I skip that question?
I think so. Users didn't answer that question, Subbu.
Oh man. Oh sorry. I apologize. I don't know. Can I go back one slide? I don't think so. Is it? Yeah, I don't think we can go back to this question though. Eh, okay. All right. So, assuming that most of you guys got the last question right, I think the leaderboard is still pretty tight. So, uh, best of luck for the next quiz, I guess. Apologies for skipping the last question unintentionally, though. But that answer was right, so you can. And the next is essentially. Oh, I think okay. I think everyone has a chance to answer this again. This is the last question.
No, again, you submitted. I don't. We are not able to submit the answers.
Okay. All right. I think okay. This is the final. This is the final time. Okay. All right. My bad there. Sorry. Okay. And then the next is the poll. So you should be able to answer the poll now. Please do put in what is the next session that you guys would like. Please please put in as many topics as possible, and we will take the input and we'll try and schedule the next session covering as many relevant topics as we can in one episode. I think multiple on architecture. Okay, maybe we do one overall from the architecture series as well, but from a security standpoint for these masterclass series, if there's anything else that you guys would like to add from a security standpoint, I think we saw for API security, and I'm assuming that's more in-depth or rather hands-on demos for API security. I think hands-on practice is what I saw there as well. Okay. Best practices, okay. My only word of caution with best practice, it do not take it as the silver bullet as the only practice, because I've seen sometimes following only best practices without the actual application intent can cause a much worse performance or security issues than what you would want. So it's again, these are best practices for 80% of your scenarios, but there will be that 20% for which you might have to go in for a slightly different thought process. I do see a lot of SOAP APIs request. Yeah, do I thought most businesses have moved on to REST? Are Do we still have a lot of SOAP APIs being used? Okay, I think I think that's great. So we will take these points and we'll try and create an episode trying to capture as many of these topics as possible in the next few episodes. So this masterclass series has about 2 or 3 more episodes left in it. We'll focus more on application security, and I'll take some of these inputs and tailor them for the application security part of it. If there are any more inputs, please do reach out on the WhatsApp groups as well. If you guys want, we can do a quick virtual selfie per se, and see you guys in the next episode. So thank you all for giving your time over the weekend. It's been a fun interaction. Thank you, Sandeep, for all of your time and effort and helping us go through this API security topic. I think it was very useful. Thank you for all participants, Sriram and other participants, for asking the questions, which has helped the group as a whole. And see you guys in the next episode. Thank you all. Have a great weekend. Bye bye.
Thanks, Subbu.
Thanks. Bye bye.